Hey now, say now, you know who it is and what it is. It is yours truly, the miraculously manifested mystical mouthpiece himself, KM for the record. Nationally recognized and locally accepted. Yeah, man, the babyface, straight-laced, top ace of this personified divine-ism. And I'm coming to y'all live and direct today from my humble abode. And I am hailing from the Modern Lodge of Mystic Masons here in Chicago, where I am currently the seated most worshipful master. And my purpose of making this video is because I think that the quarrel between John G. Jones and Thornton A. Jackson is petty. I really think that they could have resolved their issues in a more professional manner. I think as two men, as astute as they were, they could have came to an overall complete agreement for the betterment of Freemasonry. As we have already seen during the Prince Hall Origin Compact, we know about these things from 1847 into 1877. That this compact pretty much existed, that had installed 23 subordinate Grand Lodges throughout the United States. So we know about them implanting these Grand Lodges in different jurisdictions and maintaining the dignity and integrity of the regularity of Freemasonry. So PHO is by origin a legitimate body of Freemasons. They're just not recognized. So with that being said, understanding that these compacts and things happen during the same, John G. Jones was born in 1849. These compacts and things took place in 1847 and 1848. From 1848 up, it was on. So he was kind of born into this legacy of this dissension between, of this tension between PHO and PHA. So I say that to stipulate the ground basis, and I would also like to correct myself on a statement which I delivered last night on Brother Tony Muhammad's page. I was speaking of passion and distraction, meaning while speaking passionately about the subject, I was distracted by the comments because I was reading them at the same time, and I said something trying to interject, and I overlapped my words, and I meant to say that Albert Pike was in communication with Thornton A. Jackson, and Thornton A. Jackson's communication with Albert Pike inevitably is what led to John G. Jones's formulation of what we know as the PHA Shriners. So for me, I was trying to stipulate that standpoint by utilizing the communication between Thornton A. Jackson and Albert Pike. And I would also like to apologize to the brother for misquoting him that was present on the Masonic Roundtable. So with that being said, I take complete and full responsibility for my words. And as far as the tension between Thornton A. Jackson and John G. Jones, I think that the quarrel is petty. I think it's something that can have been resolved. It's been 120 years, and PHA and John G. Jones are still arguing. I understand that this quarrel, this internal quarrel, exists between Black Masons for a few reasons, and one of those reasons is that during the formation of this PHO compact, we have to remember this was before Reconstruction. So a lot of the reason that they were trying to formulate and stipulate these councils was to not be in subordination to what they considered white lodges at the time. And a lot of these brothers understood that they were not recognized as Freemasons by white lodges, but it was the French Freemasons. When I say white lodges, I mean American European men. They were not recognizing Black Freemasons, and even those Freemasons that were seen as Masons that could have Masons present at Masonic funerals and things like that. Act out Masonic rites at funerals or the Masonic funeral rites, etc. These guys still didn't have the absolute rights of a man, first of all, nor did they have the absolute rights of a Mason, because they weren't seen as human by European Americans. So during this establishment of a lot of this stuff. This is right before Reconstruction, so we have to keep a lot of that stuff in mind. So John G. Jones coming up, he's very prominent. He enters into the Illinois bar. You know, he goes through a lot of different levels in Freemasonry. He has an outstanding Masonic repertoire and resume. So for me, it doesn't sit well when I hear other black Masons say that he is the father of bogus Freemasonry, because from my perspective, coming from a lodge that has our charter from the Grand Orient of France, the way that they speak of John G. Jones is very different. And my European brothers and my Sikh brothers and my Fijian brothers that are in my lodge, they often ask me, what is the big deal and why can't black Masons just, you know, get along? And they ask me simple questions like, well, why does it seem like anywhere there's a structure of power, black people seem to have a hard time getting along? And I say, because usually where there's a structure of power, there's someone who looks like you, who doesn't have the best interests at hand for the development of my people. So what happens is you see a large form of tension. And then he said, well, what about those people who don't have the European presence? I said, well, then you deal with the psychological effects of post-traumatic slave syndrome. And these brothers feeling like if it's not done this way, it's not right, because this is the way that they gave us. And they said do it this way. And if we're not in regularity, they're not going to recognize us, when we know for a fact that the French was the Frenchmen were the one who sanctioned our councils. The French were the one who gave us our charters. Okay, this is what we know. Before, when Prince Hall petitioned the Grand Lodge of England, and he even petitioned lodges here in America. Okay, and what we need to understand is that it was although he was granted the charter within a 3-month span, it took almost 4 years for the letter to reach America again. So these brothers was recognized as Masons, and but not completely, and they was able to allow other brothers into the body of their lodges, but it was very difficult for them to develop a particular identity. And I think that's where the discord between Thornton A. Jackson and John G. Jones comes in, because you're dealing with, from my perspective, just my personal perspective, you can call me right or you could call me wrong, but I don't care either way. From my personal perspective, I see Thornton A. Jackson as more of the Martin Luther King, and John G. Jones is more of the Malcolm X, meaning Thornton A. Jackson saw the progression and the possibility for further progression for African Americans in America to be accepted into mainstream society. And he knew the best way to do that was to do it through the office, which was the highest held. Okay? The presidents, the mayors, these different politicians, they're all Masons. So he's, in his mind, he's like, this is our forefront to politics, whereas John G. Jones had already set a high standard and bar for what black success looked like. And from the PHA perspective, the narrative is that John G. Jones was arrogant, he was a swindler, he was a con artist, and all of this, and he was just mad because things didn't go his way. But when you read the minutes, it clearly states that he asked to be excused or for a leave of absence, and in his absence they voted him down. Okay, so he went from being a lieutenant to being like I can't remember exactly, but he was like in a lower position and honorary standing than he originally was. Not only that, he lost his election to Thornton A. Jackson to become the Sovereign Grand Commander. So he felt slighted. And in him feeling slighted, this is the narrative of PHA. And in him feeling slighted, or feeling like he had been played, right, for modern terminology, he went and he started his own Supreme Grand Council in an attempt to try to overthrow PHA. And I necessarily don't disagree or agree with that statement, because all the facts are still not presented. there still has not been an expiration on the research that is done on these claims of him being arrested and being a criminal and being all of these nasty, slanderous things that they constantly talk about him. And it's interesting because we know that John G. Jones had a fundamental input, right, on the development of black conscious thought in America, due to the simple fact that if you ever read Masonic abolitionists, John G. Jones is on the front cover. If you ever read a lot of Masonic books or European books that deal with like abolitionism and slavery, they never call John G. Jones a bogus or clandestine spurious mason or father of bogus Freemasonry. They just call him Brother John G. Jones, 33rd degree from Chicago, Illinois. They don't go into his whole background, because if they did that, then you know who else they would have to do that to? Albert Pike. Okay? They would have to do that to a lot of American Masons. They would then have to question the establishment and existence of the tavern of 1733, of the first Grand Lodge here in America. They would have to question the establishment and legitimacy of all of these places. Although the Grand Orient of France is not recognized by mainstream Freemasonry, we are a legitimate body, okay? The Grand Orient of France is a legitimate body of Freemasons, and although they are seen to not be regular in their practices any longer, they have no longer been recognized by mainstream Freemasonry. My Grand Chapter in particular, or my Grand Lodge in particular, because we use those words interchangeably, my Grand Lodge in particular is sovereign, okay? So we're not having women meeting our lodge. The Non-Society Shrine of the Modern Mystics, once again, is an institution that encompasses the teachings of Masonry, Rosicrucianism, Theosophy, and religion. And we bring it all into one space. If people want to socialize and talk about all of that in one space, they're more than welcome to come to the Non-Society Shrine of the Modern Mystic every Sunday, where we have open discussions about these things in a large environment where everybody from different orders can convey the similarities as opposed to the differences between our orders. And we're not speaking about anything that will break the oath or our obligation. Okay? So when we're talking about people doing certain things, the Non-Society of Shrine of the Modern Mystics is an institution that encompasses the teachings of all philosophical thought for the enhancement of the human mind. We do not go on these tangents about intellectual ability and thinking that we're smarter than the next person. I know I have room to grow. I'm only 30 years old. I'll be 31 on the 28th of this month. And with that being said, I'm still young in my information and development of my information, but I am very astute and I'm willing to take correction when proper correction is given. So with that being said, I feel personally, like I said, that John G. Jones was more of the Malcolm X. He wanted to take the Freemasonry in a direction that was more prevalent for the benefit of black people in an area of isolation, okay? So I'm going to read something because I know a lot of people like to say, well, give me some documentation before 1903. Like I said, my job is neither to defend, right? My job is neither to defend nor to support what our brother John G. Jones has done. But this is very interesting when we look at this. This is from a newspaper clip, okay? This is from newspapers.com. This newspaper is called The Broad Axe, okay? It's from Salt Lake City, Utah. And then it moved to Chicago. Now, this is one of the articles that it's on. John G. Jones, Masonry. Okay, let's view the clipping. High Masonic degrees conferred upon Honorable John G. Jones, 33 of Chicago, Illinois. One of the most important events in the history of the colored Masons in the United States occurred last Wednesday evening, November 30th, 1904, at the Masonic Hall in Chicago, Illinois. It was the conferring of the high Masonic degrees, which are known as the Royal Order of Scotland, upon Illinois. John G. Jones, 33, a very learned and distinguished colored Mason of Chicago, by Dr. Frederick B. Ashley, 33rd degree, of the Republic of Panama, who was assisted in the ceremony by several prominent white Masons from that country. This is the first colored Mason in the world who has ever had those high Masonic degrees conferred upon them. Mr. Jones has the power and authority to institute and propagate Masonic work in this country. Mr. Jones' 33rd degree is a lawyer at Chicago Bar, ex-member of the legislature of the state of Illinois, and is a 33rd degree ancient accepted Scottish Rite Mason and sovereign Grand Master of the Supreme Grand Council of North America and the Knights of the Red Cross of Constantine, and also Grand Secretary of the Most Worshipful St. John's Grand Lodge, AF and A Masons of the state of Illinois and jurisdiction. He is a man whose character for ability and learning in the Masonic world places him high as an instructor, lecturer, and Masonic jurist. And that's coming from the Broad Axe, December 10th, 1904, on a Saturday, page 2. And it's very easy to clarify what the Broad Axe is. The Broad Axe was established in 1895, 1931. It was a weekly newspaper that began publication on August 31st, 1895, originally in Salt Lake City, Utah, by Julius F. Taylor. Right after a series of conflicts with the Latter-day Saints, Taylor relocated the newspaper to Chicago, Illinois in 1899. The Broad Axe has been described as the most controversial black newspaper in Chicago in the late 19th century, in some ways due to the criticism of Booker T. Washington. The last known surviving issue of the Broad Axe is dated September 10th, 1927, but the obituary for Taylor, published in the Chicago Defender, states that the newspaper ceased publication in 1931. Issues for years 1895 to 1922 have been digitized and available for free online at Chronicizing America and the University of Illinois Libraries Illinois digital newspaper collections. And these are the references. Okay. So when I look at certain instances of the way that people attempt to demonize John G. Jones, and then I read other people's perspectives on him. Not just that one. There's many. I ain't got much time. I got stuff to do. But there's a lot of things that reflect the greatness of John G. Jones and what he actually offered to the community and the organization of Freemasonry, to the fraternity of Freemasonry, and to the moral ethics of Freemasonry. So far as when we look at certain people who still bear the name of Prince Hall, that do affiliate themselves with John G. Jones. There are Prince Hall lodges that are Prince Hall lodges that they say were established by John G. Jones or helped to be established by John G. Jones. And then they go through this array of demonstrations of him getting into it with people that apparently he was making spurious and clandestine Masons anyways, conferring degrees illegally to them anyways, and all of this type of stuff. So it's very interesting when we deal with the validity of what John G. Jones stood for versus what people actually say he stood for. I'm just saying, from my perspective, from the most objective intellectual perspective, I just think that it's petty. I think it's been 120 years, and if we can claim that all this stuff that's been taking place in the last 50 years due to segregation and Jim Crow, and that black people should just get over that and integrate with Europeans, I don't see why we can't have the same type of mind state and veracity towards the unification and the elimination of this petty rivalry between John G. Jones and Thornton A. Jackson, which they say is PHA. So for me, And I say Thornton Jackson and John G. Jones because I see that's where it's stemming from. It's not stemming from any other place other than the fact that these internal conflicts have always existed within Masonry, period. White, black, whatever. These internal conflicts will continue to exist, and it will continue to birth based out of disagreement. And we have to understand that these things make us actually better and perfect us and shape our ashra due to the fact that we're learning how not to be like certain people, and we're learning what not to do. And if we can use these examples as a way, as allegorical teaching lessons for future generations to come, then they'll know not to do the same thing. Then they'll know not to go on this path and don't take up that. So I think that's very important. And with that being said, like I said, that's all I got.